About The Last of Us Part 1, a lot has been said, because this game truly leaves you with a feeling that you've played a work of art, that deserves the attention of anyone who even remotely enjoys the zombie genre and is a true connoisseur of storytelling in video games and movies. At the time of The Last of Us release in 2013, I was still a schoolboy and I loved watching playthroughs, since I didn't have a powerful PC, let alone a console. After watching an extensive playthrough of this game, I really liked it, and I had the thought in my mind that someday I would be able to play it myself. And the time has come now. The PC version of this masterpiece was released, and I immediately started playing it. Of course, I encountered terrible optimization, and even so my PC eventually allowed me to play on high settings, with occasional freezes. The initial impression was somewhat dampened. However, despite the poor technical state, I was able to immerse myself in the atmosphere and understand that playing it myself is a completely different experience. Today I want to talk about the legendary The Last of Us. In this video we will talk about how the game was created, discuss its mechanics and of course its story. We will try to understand why it resonates so deeply when played. And what is your relationship with The Last of Us? Share your stories or warm memories in the comments. The development of the game was carried out by the renowned studio Naughty Dog, which had already given us game series such as Crash Bandicoot, Jak and Daxter and Uncharted. After the release of Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, the studio decided to split into two teams. One team would focus on the Uncharted, while the other would start developing an entirely new game series, which turned out to be The Last of Us. Neil Druckmann became the creative director of the project. During his university years, he studied criminology before transitioning into game development. He had the opportunity to pitch his thoughts at the workshop led by George Romero in 2004. At this workshop, participants presented their ideas for zombie games and Romero was supposed to choose the best one. The original concept for his game involved a police officer with a heart condition, who had to protect a young girl in a city overrun by the undead. When the main character's illness took hold, the girl would become the new protagonist, taking on the role of protector. Unfortunately, Romero didn't find Druckmann's idea particularly engaging. Later, Neil's idea underwent some changes, but he didn't stray far from his core concept. After joining Naughty Dog, he released his idea in a comic that he personally drew. The idea continued to evolve and eventually materialized into the concept with a cordyceps infection. When creating the setting, the developers drew inspiration from movies such as No Country for Old Men, The Road and City of Thieves. However, the biggest influence on the game came from an episode of the BBC series Planet Earth that discussed the fungus cordyceps, capable of reproducing inside insects and essentially making them work for it. And if you still enjoy the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Therefore, cordyceps is not a product of the developer's imagination. It is a real fungus that parasitizes insects. When the spores of the fungus enter the body of an ant, caterpillar, fly or spider, they start growing inside the insect's body. All of this was transposed onto humans, resulting in The Last of Us. The monsters in the game go through several stages of infection, with the final stage removing all human characteristics. The disease progresses through several stages. 2 days after infection, a person partly loses their sanity and vision, entering the first stage called the runner. The infected individual retains their consciousness but can no longer control their actions, displaying aggression and losing touch with reality. Due to the growth of fungal spores on the heads, infected individuals gradually lose their vision and begin using echolocation for spatial orientation, emitting distinctive clicks. In this brief second stage called the stalker, the infected still retain traces of intelligence and can't form groups. However, in the third stage, known as the clicker, the infected almost completely lose their human traits. Their heads and bodies become covered in fungi. Vision is completely replaced by echolocation and they gain human strength. The cycle concludes with the fourth stage called the bloater. During this stage, the infected individual swells up like a bloated corpse, and their body is covered in a dense layer of protective fungal plates. In this state, a bloater can live for several years, but eventually they inevitably perish. Their body bursts and the skeleton becomes a framework on which the fungus grows and releases abundant spores. The developers continued to study literature, documentaries and global pandemics, such as Spanish flu pandemic and the polio epidemic in the United States, in order to present the events of the game as realistically as possible. The main intention of the game was not to create a protagonist fighting against a specific antagonist, but to make the characters face the environment itself. The infected and other humans who, like them, are fighting for survival. The developers wanted to depict a morally grey world, where the actions of both of the main characters and some NPCs are not entirely good or bad, given the circumstances they find themselves in. The story begins like in typical zombie movies, with no scenes of trouble. The main protagonist Joel returns from work and decides to relax on the couch. He lives alone with his daughter Sarah, who surprises him with a gift of a watch. It turns out to be Joel's birthday. Joel and Sarah go to bed, but suddenly Sarah wakes up from a noise. Joel is not in the room and then he rushes into the house from outside. Their neighbors have become infected. Joel's younger brother Tommy arrives and takes Joel and Sarah to leave the city. Traffic jams are everywhere. Chaos ensues, and infected individuals appear on the roads. Our characters get into a car accident, but everyone survives. It's time to run. Carrying his daughter Sarah, the protagonist makes his way through the burning streets and the city is filled with screaming and infected people. When they reach the outskirts of the city, our characters encounter a soldier who receives orders to shoot them. Joel survives, but Sarah dies in his arms. At that moment, Tommy arrives and kills the soldier with a shot to the head. This is how the prologue ends. The main events of the story take place 20 years after the beginning. Joel has settled in one of the quarantine zones in Boston. His life clearly lacks joy after his daughter's death, and he survives by smuggling and obtaining ration cards for food. His only friend is a woman named Tess, with whom he's about to embark on another job. A certain arms dealer named Robert offers them weapons, so they set out to find him. We are shown what the quarantine zone looks like, which is currently under attack by a faction calling themselves the Fireflies. Joel and Tess navigate the streets, passing through tunnels and abandoned houses to reach their destination. Our debtor is not particularly welcoming, so his people don't want to let us through. Joel has to deal with Robert's men. When they reach Robert himself, they learn that he has given the weapons to a group called the Fireflies, whom we will learn more about as the game progresses. Joel and Tess finish off Robert, and the wounded Marlene, a member of the Fireflies, appears. She offers a deal. Marlene will give them the weapons if they take the girl Ellie to the Capitol building. Reluctantly, Joel eventually agrees. There is an out-court encounter between Joel and Ellie. Joel remains cold and unfriendly, waiting to complete the job quickly and go have a beer on the couch. On their way to the Capitol building, our characters encounter a military patrol. The soldiers scan them for infection, and just as Ellie turns, she attacks one of the soldiers. In the chaos, they deal with the patrol. Using a device to check Ellie, they discover that she is infected, but hasn't turned yet because it has been more than 3 weeks since she was beaten, whereas the transformation usually occurs within 2 days at most. Joel thinks it's a setup, but there is no time to argue. Another patrol is approaching, so they hide in the sewers. Later, Ellie explains that the Fireflies sent her to the Capitol building to be studied by their scientists in hopes of finding a cure and creating a vaccine. Joel wants to return to the home, but Tess believes that Ellie could save the world. Nevertheless, the trio continues their journey and reaches the Capitol building. Upon arrival, they find the Fireflies members dead, who are supposed to collect Ellie. They search the bodies looking for any information, but find nothing. Joel suggests they go back home, but Tess shows a fresh beat on her neck, desperately asks Joel to take Ellie to the location, as she might actually be able to help create a vaccine. At that moment, the military forces break into the Capitol building. Tess sacrifices herself by holding them off, while Joel and Ellie escape. And so begins the distant journey of the bearded, melancholic man and the young girl named Ellie, during which they get to know each other better. Joel becomes less cold towards Ellie, which eventually leads to her becoming a new meaning of life for him. And you know how it all turns out. At first glance, the plot seems simple and doesn't claim to be particularly deep. However, by personally experiencing it or even watching a full playthrough of this wonderful game, you will understand why it deeply resonates with people's souls. When playing it yourself, you become fully immersed in the story, much like watching a great movie, but at the same time you are provided with excellent deep gameplay that further intensifies the emotions you experience throughout the game. The Last of Us is a truly outstanding game because it genuinely looks like a cinematic experience. The beautifully crafted scenes, action sequences and horror moments truly makes you hold your breath as you deeply care about the characters. The developers have managed to create cohesive, interesting, non-cliched story that remains captivating throughout the entire playthrough. The chemistry between Ellie and Joel is depicted in such detail that even while looting yet another house, you might come across an unexpected dialogue or anecdote between the characters. These conversations are not just plot-driven, they are ordinary, everyday interactions that make you believe that the characters are real people. There are no games like this nowadays, and the first part is truly unique. It combines high-quality gameplay with a cinematic, professionally crafted story. And I won't even get started on the music and ambience by Gustavo. No, not this one, Gustavo Santaolalla. He managed to create a soul-stirring soundtrack that is easier to listen to than to describe in words. It's as if he needs a separate video dedicated to his work. So now it's time to talk about the gameplay. The gameplay of The Last of Us is best experienced on the highest difficulty setting, because that's when looting becomes essential, forcing you to conserve ammunition and approach enemies strategically. The game doesn't forgive mistakes. If you make a noise in a large room with a bunch of zombies, attracting the attention of one will alert all the others, leaving you with slim chances of survival. And even if you manage to survive, you'll likely deplete your entire ammo supply, making things much tougher. The game encourages cautious and stealthy play, providing you with the tools to craft traps and distractions, as well as offering multiple paths to reach your objective. You are given a shift for silent kills, both against humans and zombies. Additionally, you have access to a bow for silent long-range kills, as well as two-handed weapons like sticks, axes and pipes with limited durability. Molotov cocktails are also effective tools to use in combat. For moments when shooting is necessary, the game provides various firearms such as pistols, revolvers, shotguns, rifles, a shaved-off shotgun, and even a flamethrower. The battles are designed in a way that throws you into an arena with a certain number of covers, options and possibilities. It's up to you to strategically distribute your resources and decide when and where to engage in combat. Different approaches are required when facing humans. I often used firearms against them, taking one hostage and engaging others with my pistol. It looked very cool. With zombies, caution is key, and traps and shifts become more useful. The chances of dying from a zombie, especially a clicker, are much higher than from a regular human enemy. Throughout the game, the gameplay is spiced up with new elements. You may be given new weapons or a plethora of resources to upgrade your firearms at workbenches. Using herbs and the character's abilities, you can enhance your hearing, health and more. After battles with humans, you're often thrown into some kind of underground area or sewer, where you have to adjust your gameplay to deal with the infected. The locations constantly change, and it's fascinating to explore and simply wander around. There are also very tense moments, like the level in a flooded technical facility, where you have to find a keycard while being pursued by a bloater. In this situation, you either have to unload all your ammo into it or run for your life. It was probably the scariest moment in the game for me. The gameplay of The Last of Us is a perfect balance of stealth, resource management, combat and exploration. It keeps you on the edge of your seat and offers a variety of challenging and memorable experiences. Or when we get to play as Ellie without any weapons and we have to make our way through crowds of enemies to reach Joel. And the most important thing is that the shooting feels very satisfying, with recoil that is well felt even with a pistol. The impact from hits is intense, especially when shooting at the head with a large or small caliber weapon. You can literally see pieces of brain if you get close enough. Therefore, the gameplay combined with interesting shooting mechanics, scavenging and the weapon and character upgrade system, especially in moments when you're running low on ammo, makes the gameplay tense and captivating. You really have to try to survive. In the end, no matter how bad the PC port of The Last of Us may be, the game itself remains practically perfect. I'm glad that I had the chance to experience this game personally, 10 years after its release. Playing it gives you completely different emotions compared to other games. Here you can feel a range of emotions from sadness to finding yourself smiling at moments like Ellie and Joel's conversation about video games or music. The game features stunning graphics and characters, excellent gameplay and story, and the locations make you stop and admire the local landscapes, accompanied by an incredibly cool soundtrack. If you haven't played the first part of The Last of Us for some reason, now is the perfect time to try it.